Hey guys, I've been asked quite a few times why the meta has shifted so dramatically over the last little bit, the last few months especially. But the start of CCL, people started noticing that the meta was a lot different than it's been in the past, and this team comp on the left is something that we've seen a lot of. Uther main tank, Diva as a backup, second healer available to keep Uther and them alive. And the team comp on the right is something that, if you follow the competitive environment, you've seen this team comp before, and you know what it does. So why has the meta shifted so strangely where we're seeing double tank, double heals, and triple bruiser more often than we normally did in the past? Back in HGC, double healer was used here and there, but it wasn't used that much. And the same thing's true with things like double tank and triple bruiser. They were used, but not that much. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a history story on how we ended up at this meta and what we needed to do to get to where we are, and how maybe this meta might be fixed. So at first we need to understand what the meta was like for HGC. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up Master League and show you guys some of the stats we saw in HGC. So if you guys have never been to Master League, they show a lot of old tournaments. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this back down to HGC, and we're going to go to HGC North America Open Division, right? This gives us a pretty good idea of what some of the games will look like and what the heroes we will see. We did see some. Let's go down to some of the drafts. So we had top picks for heroes like Genji, Abathur, Yrel. These were often banned. Maiev was almost 100% either banned or picked every single game. And we had a lot of these were relatively common. Here are the team comps that we saw a lot of. We had Warrior, and keep in mind, Warriors included Bruiser, so this is most of the time a tank, a Bruiser, a healer, and 2 damage dealers. Or we would likely see a tank, a Bruiser, a healer, a damage dealer, and a specialist. Now, a specialist could have been, it could have been Sergeant Hammer, it could have been Medivh, it could have been any variation of, like, what we now know as support, or even some assassins used to be considered specialists. So these were the most common team comps that we would see. Every once in a while, we would see an assassin fill this solo lane role, or we would see double healer. But overall, you can see that most of these compositions are relatively normal. Tank, solo laner, healer, 2 assassins, or one of the assassins as a specialist. And that's it. But what started to happen and what people started to learn was that these team comps were leading to a very inactive playstyle. What I mean by that is, or just an unengaged playstyle. A lot of people were drafting heroes that would force engages from nothing, or heroes that would counter engage and stop a team fight that's happening. Someone like a Yrel in the competitive environment in HGC was used to disengage more than she was used to engage. Blaze is the same. He would use Bunker to disengage for his team. And this would happen so often. And out of the teams that they were running as far as these heroes, you would see that many of them would run combos, where if one single CC landed, their entire team would be able to chain CC until that target is dead. You would see things like Deckard comboing with Diablo, you would see Diablo comboing with Medivh, Maiev would combo with whatever tank you ran, and these combos were so common that any individual that got stunned by a single thing would get dropped very, very quickly. And we should be able to see some of these drafts down here so you can see what I'm talking about. You'll have things like VP that would set up for Blessed Shield, that would then be blown up by Li Ming. You would have things like Hanzo that would set up, he would throw out an ult that would set up for ETC stuns, or Earthquake that would slow them long enough for either of these abilities to land. And it got so bad, and this is actually just Crucible, but it got so bad that when I was talking to a few of the professional players back at BlizzCon, a lot of them said that it wasn't really that enjoyable. Everyone kind of just ran back and forth a little bit, waiting for a single CC to go off at the tiniest little mistake to go off, and you would get one pick, and then the enemies would just go and try to get value elsewhere while you would take an objective. And so, and we'll go into like HEC phase 1, and we'll go into like group stage 1 and look at these team comps again. And again, we're going to start seeing a lot of the same things. You're either going to see heavy engage comps, or you're going to see counter engage comps, where you're going to see a lot of Falstad for gusts. You're going to be seeing a lot of things, but you're going to be seeing like Leorix to set up for these engages. You're going to see Falstad and Tyrael to counter engage. So where on this team you might have a heavy engage with Hanzo, with any of these, you're going to have a lot of counter engages. And so this is where the meta was for a long time. A whole bunch of counter engages into one combo, and the one combo would lead to your team winning, and every other counter engage would lead to your team not losing by the enemy's combo. You'd have a lot of ways to force fights with either Maiev, Leoric, or a variation of like Medivh and Anubarak, or Medivh and Diablo, or anything like that. And every single team in HEC was running a combo to win a team fight, and every single team was running some form of disengage, and if they didn't have a form of disengage, they would usually lose. Now, this continued for a long time, and it continued into when HEC died off. We started seeing Premier Series, and we started seeing Storm Division and Heroes Lounge being created. And when those divisions were created and there was these big prize pools, we saw variations of the same problem continuing forward. We saw combos, and we would see less disengages. So the team that comboed first would generally win. And so we had a team like Celeb TV who would absolutely dominate because they just got more practice and they knew the exact times to combo. And they were doing things like Joanna with Light Bomb because nobody knew how to react to it. Because people weren't used to running Tyrael. They weren't used to running Gust. They weren't used to running Divine Shield. The things that HEC got around so that those things wouldn't happen. But when we started having these in the tournaments like Premier Series, let me see if I could pull up North America Premier Series. We were seeing Joanna and Anduin being played. Let me go into Cup 1 really quick. We were seeing Joanna being played all the time, usually with Anduin, and this is not the full tournament. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see the full drafts. But Celeb TV went in there, and they were absolutely dominating with that combo, Joanna Anduin, and they were doing these heavy engages, and we stopped seeing these disengage heroes. We don't see Tyrael anymore, we don't see Blaze anymore, we don't see Falstad anymore, because it's just the teams that are winning are just better at knowing when to engage. And so the meta shifted, and it started getting to the point where it looked like there was no counter to these combo comps, because people kind of forgot what the pro teams learned in HEC. And so people were getting less efficient at their combos, so it seemed like there were more ways around a combo, and people started getting a little bit more complacent with their practicing, and so combos were no longer death sentences, and there were more ways around it than drafting counter engages or disengages. So you start seeing wider hero pools, but those combos end up being absolutely dominant for a while. Then we get into the meta where we get the medallion. And for those that don't know, let me throw or bring up the medallion really quick. Let's go into images. Where is a picture of this medallion? I'm surprised nobody has this. Well, the medallion was this little thing right here. And what it did was you could activate it to give yourself unstoppable for 1 second. And that doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but when there's a lot of people setting up combos for their teams, that medallion allowed you to save one member of your team. I mean, the person that is being attacked, of course, as long as they still have their medallion available, they could save themselves. And so the medallion was a great way to allow the meta to get away from these heavy combos and go more into a longer fight playstyle, because your combos aren't going to be a complete death sentence anymore, even though they already really weren't, because people had gotten a lot sloppier since HGC. There's just less money on the line, less time to practice, so people didn't really have that need. The players are still very good individually, they just haven't had the need to practice as much as they had in the past. So because players started getting a lot sloppier, because this is even before CCL, there just wasn't really the reason to get perfect with those combos. This was their answer to these chain CC team comps. And so the medallion was something that was out for a little while, and then it was removed. But during the time that it was still there, teams started realizing that you can't combo someone down, so we need to draft things that can last in longer fights. And thus began the bruiser-ish meta, where teams would run more than one bruiser per team, because bruisers in Heroes of the Storm have some of the highest stat pools. And why I say that is because if you're playing a ranged assassin, you generally do more damage, but to compensate for the fact that you're in a safer position and doing more damage, Blizzard has to cut down your survivability significantly. So they drop down your survivability, and thus you're easier to kill. So tanks generally have more CC and mobility and utility, so they have to drop down their damage to compensate for their high utility and high health. And that's why tanks don't do that much damage. But bruisers, they have to be up in the front of the fight. They don't have as much utility as tanks do, so they have to have high health and high damage, which creates probably the most powerful role in paper, or at least on paper. So people started realizing that in order to answer this, hey, we can't just combo people down anymore because of the medallion, we need to have bruisers. And when people started running more tanks and more bruisers, they found that they had a higher chance to win these games. And more healers. They found that they had a higher chance to win these games. And that is kind of what initially created this meta. But when the medallion was removed, you would think that it would have fixed that meta, but instead, people doubled down. Because what started coming back were combos. And people didn't have enough health to survive these combos, and they weren't coordinated enough to do these disengages or counter engages that were done in HGC. So instead, they went with higher health pools and more support. And so double support comms started running one burst support and one sustain support. The burst support would go to answer the initial combo, where the sustain support would go to answering the overall length of a fight. And the same is true for the triple bruiser comms. You end up with these high stats, and you can usually survive the initial burst combo that's going out, and then turn the fight around. And once again, that's where these double tank metas came from. So where we're seeing all of these like main tank bruisers, and we're seeing these triple bruisers and double tanks and double healers so much more often in the competitive scene, is purely because we haven't had as much practice as we had during HEC for people to get the combos down perfectly and to counter engage the combos perfectly. And bruisers just have so much more stats in every aspect than every other role. So when it comes down to pure brawling, bruisers tend to win, which is why there's this heavy priority on bruisers. There's a heavy priority on double healers because it's surprisingly good into triple bruiser. Bruisers don't do as much burst as those old combos did, and these double healers can out-heal the overall output that these triple bruisers are bringing out. So suddenly, the meta has shifted to kind of a mix of these team comps. Does that mean that the old comps don't work? No. Even we've seen the Joanna Anduin still being used in both European tournaments and North America tournaments recently. We've still seen a lot of variations of the old team comps being used, while Maev isn't really being used as much as she used to be. Back in HEC, she had a 100% pick and ban rate. Deckard had a 90% pick or ban rate. Tyrande had a 70% pick or ban rate. A lot of those heroes aren't being used because there's just less influence on those in the current meta. But the old meta could still come back. I mean, with a bit more practice and going in and engaging and more map control, understanding the vision of the map and what you can be doing, I think there is a point where the old meta can certainly work, especially if your team practices more than the opposing team. I think the current meta is definitely a not necessarily a problem, but a result of there not needing to be practice. You don't really have money on the line, so there's not really a lot of need to throw a ton of time into practice. So these fights end up being a little bit sloppier. This particular fight right here was an off-season tournament between two competitive teams, and these teams are solid teams. I mean, you can recognize the members on blue team as being the members of Celeb TV that I talked about earlier, the team that was absolutely dominating in Premier Series and in Heroes Lounge and the higher ranks of Nexus Gaming Series. And the team on the right is ACA, Anti-Clown Association, who won the first season of Division S. It might have been the second season of Division S. Which was Storm Division, and definitely a solid competitive team. Albeit their strategies are a little bit more crazy than most teams. This is two competitive teams in North America who have beat European teams and Korean teams, just duking it out. And it looks like a sloppy game, but that's why this meta is the way that it is because what the team ACA has been using this new meta for is to create chaos, and then they tend to draft higher stat teams and higher stat heroes that when they turn the game into chaos and the enemies are not comboing perfectly, they tend to win purely because they win in these chaotic fights. And so it kind of forces the enemy teams to not really know how to answer it. With that being said, I think this game goes a little back and forth, and I don't remember exactly who won this game, but both of these teams are definitely solid teams, and it's just fun to watch. Now, how the meta is going to shift before, I would imagine with the current meta the way that it is, teams will likely go back to combos, because there's not a lot of answers to combos right now. These heroes that they're playing, for example, WBuild Sonya wants long drawn out fights, but in HEC a Sonya that stepped up would just get blown up to the point that Sonya was outclassed in the competitive environment because she took too long to get the same value that anyone else could have gotten off, and she didn't have the survivability of someone like Yrel. And so her gain in popularity is because of her buffs, but her weakness that she had during HEC is still around. So I definitely think that what we will be seeing now that the competitive scene is growing more is these teams are going to get more and more time to practice together, and we will start seeing more of these combos coming out, and the team that handles the combos the best will likely come ahead. Once these teams start realizing that combos are the answer, they'll probably also start looking at combos and potentially running more counter engages or answers to combos like Sanctification, which was played a ton in HEC, and Tyrael has only been buffed since HEC. So Tyrael, who was used a lot to answer the meta back in HEC times, is barely being played. And so I definitely think that we'll start slowly seeing inching back into the HEC meta. But I always think that this meta will have a place if you can create chaos. These team comps are best fighting in chaotic environments, and I think if you can create that chaos for your team, it doesn't matter how coordinated the enemy team is. And I'll quote a quote that I use a lot, which is Mike Tyson, and he says, "Everyone has a plan until they're punched in the face," and that's exactly what these teams are going to create. They're going to create this chaos that everyone has a plan until they're punched in the face, and you're going to punch them in the face, and then just spread out and win because you outstat the enemy team, and that's really what we're going to be seeing with that. Now, we'll finish watching this game so that you guys can see. I've had a lot of complaints in the past that are like, I want to see how this game ends, so that's where we're at. This is on the left side. I don't even remember what their team name is right now, to be completely honest. But they were Celeb TV, then they were VGM, and I have no idea. And I don't think the replay is going to say either, because this is a replay that I had, not a replay that I pulled. But they're solid players. You've seen me make videos about many of these players. I believe I've made a video about Maka, about Hebi, and about Cattle, and about Liam. Liam was in one of my videos. I think Tiger JK is the only one that I haven't made a video about. Tiger JK switched to Assassin. He used to play support in HEC, and he played one of the best Kharazim's in HEC, in my opinion. But yeah, and then on the right side, ACA. I don't know if I've made too many videos about them. I think I have one video about Got Filth, and that's it. But they're a solid team. I'll probably end up making more videos about them just because they're going to be playing a lot in Storm Division, and I'm friends with a few of the members of their team, so I could easily get their replays. But yeah, I mean, this is a pretty fun game. This is a pretty wild one. It looks like a stomp for ACA. ACA actually won the series against them, but they had some games like this that were a little rough in the beginning. But yeah, this triple bruiser, in this case, the triple bruiser is Sonya, Rexar, and Leoric. Their main tank is the one that's playing Leoric. Leoric actually fits pretty well in a main tank because you're the one engaging for your team. So Leoric's actually a pretty good replacement for a main tank. And if you do want to run triple bruiser, you usually throw your ranged assassin on Rexar because he kind of plays like a ranged assassin. When you get like Aspect of the Hawk, you attack 125% faster. You throw your bruiser on Sonya because you already have a lot of practice on Sonya, and you throw your tank on Leoric. And that you can get your triple bruiser and be really effective. Lucio's a great healer for triple bruiser because level 16 you can get that percent health, and you're healing very high health targets and all of them at the same time. Lucio's also really good because with bruisers, damage tends to be spread out a lot because you don't want to focus just one of them, so it allows him to really keep them up. And then he uses high five since it got buffed so that he can give unstoppable to the targets the enemies are focusing. And that's about it. On the side of the opposing team, we've seen Uther as main tank with a backup healer a lot, and a backup tank, which is just a tankier bruiser. And then with Tychus to follow up the stuns from Uther, and Sylvanas to basically cover the rest of the damage that the team needs. So both of these teams are very meta team comps right now, as I think I have 2 or 3 videos that have basically this team comp in it, in both North America and Europe. And then the one on the team comp on the right is one that I don't have a lot of videos on, but I did want to share it for this particular game. So there's only 5 minutes left in this. I'm going to fast forward as we're setting up for this next objective. Level 16s are on both teams, and what we end up having is we have this Leoric immediately going in, lowering the damage of the enemy team, and we also have the Misha just doing what she can to distract the enemies to get the rest of their team available as Mephisto's heading down. Shredder Wind's just doing what he can to keep everyone topped off, and they take a lot of bomb damage here, but again, they have that Lucio. Now, Lucio actually went with the more sustained healing rather than the burst healing with up the frequency. So we'll be seeing a lot more heals coming out from him. And you can see, without any focus on any particular hero, this comp will stay alive through just about everything. So where that ult came out, that Wailing Arrow came out, normally in HEC, that would have been comboed off of something. It would have been stunned by Uther, double stunned by Uther, it would have been Wailing Arrow into the team, and they would have had the burst damage from Bigger They Are into Grenade to blow up whatever target Uther was stunning. Then they would have Odin and used D.Va to get the objective while the enemies were down someone. But against Triple Bruiser with damage reduction, they can't really do that. And it would require like perfect coordination and perfect timing, which they just don't practice 8 hours a day like they used to. And so they can't do exactly what they did. So instead they're spreading out their damage a little bit more and looking to more overwhelm them with the fact that they have double healer. So Uther ends up taking the hit. A great Durance into a lot of damage from Mephisto ends up leading to the kill on Uther, and we have this Sonya who's able to get the rest of the objective relatively easily. And we also have that Mephisto still going in, doing a ton of damage. The Orcs reducing all of their damage and just trying to annoy them. The objective's actually dead even right now, 30 to 30. And now we're at 35, and this is the first objective for ACA. We'll fast forward as they end up going behind the enemy fort to get the first kill, and this will turn off the structures for this one. They end up going for the sidewall here while they have enemies dead so that they can jump into the enemy team and immediately start making plays. They destroy the rest of the front wall when they can't make a play, and they go to follow up whatever they need to follow up, but a great cleanse comes out from Cattle, and they end up just going back to their normal fight. He's reducing the damage of the enemy team, he's setting up for his team, and they end up getting the ult out of Uther without really needing to use too much. They use Misha to be their escape, and they go for the rest of the game. This time, they've opened up the bottom lane, and it really comes down to the next fight. If red side wins, they'll end through bot, and if blue side wins, they'll end through mid. So now both teams are pushing for level 20s to make a level 20 fight. And the other cool part about this meta is both of these team comps are very good in Storm League. There was a thing a while back I posted, and it was like it talked about I don't remember where I posted it, but I posted the stats for Storm League, and the highest winning the highest win percentage teams were double healer, tank and 2 bruisers, and triple bruiser. And those were the highest win percentages on teams in Storm League. So while I'm not recommending you like create a draft that's going to make your team upset, if you do end up having a team that's willing to adapt, those have very high win rates, and I think it's because they're easier to play. Double bruiser, double triple bruiser is really frustrating to play against because most teams are only really good for that initial fight. And that initial fight usually only lasts 10 seconds, but your team's going to run out of steam in 10 seconds where the bruiser team's going to continue forward. And if you can't kill them in 10 seconds, then you're going to really struggle. Oh, that almost was a stun there. But yeah, both teams are basically just looking for the enemies to throw. We see a pretty big play going on here. Great protection by the Uther, and this looks like it's going to be game for blue side. Damage is going to be reduced by my Palvins on their side. Kelsier is going to get dropped on this side. Gottfeld's going to most likely be dropped down on this side. And Vince is going to be alone to try and defend, but he won't be able to defend against a team that still has everyone left. So this game will go in favor of VGM, or again, whatever their name is right now. They've changed names several times. But yeah, so this is kind of just going over what the meta is today and how we got here, as well as showing you guys one game with what I would say 6 months ago we would have looked at both of these team comps and gone, this is stupid. But no, this is what we have today, and this is what we're going to deal with. I think we can still see teams running combos, and if you are a team that practices a lot, I would say it's better to practice combos than it is to practice these more bruiser-ish comps, in my opinion. But they definitely all have their place, and some are much better on certain maps. You almost don't want to go too combo heavy on a map that you need to hold a point for a long time, because then you run out of steam too fast. So there's a lot of reasons to go different comps, but hopefully you guys enjoyed this and you understand a little bit about how we got to where we got to with these metas and why we're seeing such strange team comps and how they're not as strange as you might think. Thank you guys so much for watching, and feel free to check out my other videos.